The particular bands or songs mentioned in this video, in the specific order mentioned in this video, can be found in a Spotify playlist, the link to which will be mentioned in the description.
Lost is gone, and future is a stranger.
As the name suggests, the main characteristic of symphonic metal is the presence of what we should call an orchestral sound, meaning a sound similar to that created by an orchestra. This sound is placed either as a musical background behind the characteristic sound of the heavy electric guitar, or sometimes as the main sound theme, even replacing that electric guitar. Given that A, many bands have limited budgets, and B, this music will eventually need to be performed live on a typically small stage, the symphonic sound is almost never created by a real orchestra. Obviously, we have extensive use of keyboards, which, with appropriate settings, produce the timbre that each musician desires, e.g., strings, choirs, pianos, organs, etc. So, quite a few bands of the genre either have a permanent keyboardist, e.g., Nightwish, or someone who accompanies them on tour playing keyboards live, e.g., Blind Guardian. Of course, there are also bands that don't use keyboards, preferring orchestral backing tracks that were written in advance in the studio by live musicians and/or choirs, or that were recorded using virtual instruments in a sequencer. This is particularly characteristic of bands with deeper and more complex orchestrations, which might be more difficult for one or two keyboardists to faithfully reproduce in a live setting. As for the classic metal instruments, guitars, bass, and drums, the way they are used varies depending on the metal subgenre the symphonic band is associated with. In classic symphonic metal, they often share the stage with the keyboards, or even take a back seat to them, although sometimes we'll also hear typical metal riffing. The lyrics cover a wide range of topics. Fantasy and mythology are among the most common themes. Concept albums in the style of rock operas or epic poems are not uncommon. The second characteristic that sets apart bands of this genre is the vocals. Bands often have a female singer, usually a soprano. Male singers, baritones or bass baritones, are also common, but more so on the gothic metal side of the genre. Harsher vocals are not uncommon, but they tend to be used less frequently than in other metal subgenres. A notable exception is Mark Jansen in Epica. Background vocals can also be used, often consisting of a vocal ensemble or a full choir. It's common for bands of this genre, with a female singer, to have lead vocals that are very close to opera. In that case, we could also have the even more specific name of operatic symphonic metal: Epica, Nightwish, Therion, Dolamod, Visions of Atlantis, and various others. Of course, the operatic style isn't exclusively associated with symphonic metal, but it can also appear in other subgenres. Characteristic examples are the avant-garde metal band Igor and the progressive metal band Diablo Swing Orchestra. Many bands with operatic and non-operatic female vocals also have a male singer who uses growling death metal vocals for contrast, in a vocal style often referred to as Beauty and the Beast. This technique was very popular in the early days of the genre in the late 90s. The relationship between heavy rock and classical music has been examined very often. Beyond the bands directly associated with the genre, which we will examine shortly, there's also the very popular view that composers like Wagner, Vivaldi, Beethoven, Bach, Mussorgsky, or Paganini wrote pieces whose complexity, epic nature, and atmosphere immediately bring heavy rock and metal to mind. Of course, the first direct connection between the two worlds was made toward the end of the 1960s, with the then emerging progressive rock. I'm thinking of the moody blues days of Future Past, which features a real live orchestra, the nice and keyboardist Keith Emerson, an outstanding musician who was the focal point of the band, unlike the usual practices in the rock scene at the time. the excellent Renaissance, who were just starting their career then, and of course, above all, the 1969 album Concerto for Group and Orchestra, a personal project by John Lord, in which the rest of Deep Purple participated along with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Indeed, once progressive rock became very popular, many bands either had songs directly inspired by classical music, for example, Genesis's Firth of Fifth, or yes, Close to the Edge, or direct adaptations of classical music pieces. I'm also thinking of Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Pictures at an Exhibition and the Italian New Trolls' Atomic System, both adaptations of Mussorgsky pieces. Indeed, the term symphonic prog was coined, under which were placed, in addition to the aforementioned Genesis, Yes, ELP or Renaissance, names like Camel or Harmonium, but also many Italian prog bands, PFM, Banco del Mutuo Soccorso, Osana, Maxophone, etc. Let's move a little closer to the heavy sound now. For me, the two names we need to start with are Rainbow and Queen. Ritchie Blackmore's band has always had a strongly epic and symphonic sound, with keyboards playing a prominent role, but in a different way than in Deep Purple, for example. Listen to Stargazer or Gates of Babylon. Of course, we shouldn't forget that in the 80s, their song Difficult to Cure is nothing more than a rock interpretation of Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. As for Queen, I don't see them mentioned in various articles about the style, and it's really baffling. But if there's one band that almost single-handedly brought both opera, obviously with Bohemian Rhapsody, and vocal counterpoint with the Prophet's Song into rock, it's the London Band. We can also find orchestral references in Black Sabbath, both in the various instrumentals they included on their albums and in songs like Spiral Architect, for example. In the 80s, besides Rainbow, we also had neoclassical metal, as it was built by Yngwie J. Malmsteen, Jason Becker, or Vinnie Moore. But in this case, there were no symphonic elements at all, but the influence went directly into the way the electric guitar was played. The bands with real symphonic elements were a bit more underground. The first to experiment with such sounds were Celtic Frost on albums like To Megatherion, and especially Into the Pandemonium. It has been written that symphonic metal wouldn't exist without the latter. One of the first original symphonic metal songs is considered to be Dies Irae by the American Christian thrash metal band Believer, from their 1990 album Sanity Obscure. The band continued with the symphonic elements in their next release, 1993's Dimensions, which even included the suite The Trilogy of Knowledge. Generally, 1993 proved to be pivotal for the genre's development. That year also saw the release of the first self-titled album by the American Gothic metal band Savior Machine, which had clear symphonic elements, as did the EP Art of Life by the legendary Japanese band X Japan. Also that year, the first album by Brazilian power metalers Angra was released, as well as Clown in the Mirror by the progressive metal band Royal Hunt. Both of these albums had symphonic elements in their sound. Many such elements were also present in 1994's legendary album In the Nightside Eclipse by the Norwegian band Emperor. But that band belonged to black metal, which at the time, given what was happening, was considered to be on a different planet compared to all other metal. So we had another one of the paradoxes of this music, with symphonic black metal starting before symphonic metal, and the album being ignored by future music historians.
You're the ghost hunting through.
Officially, if you read various articles online, the year the Big Bang of symphonic metal occurred is 1997, with two albums that we will mention very soon. But the truth is, the genre had clearly started at least 2 years earlier. Let's not forget that at that time, the traditional scenes that had dominated metal in the 80s, glam, thrash, classic metal, had almost dissolved, and experimentation in every direction was very popular. So, in 1995, the German Gothic rockers Lacrimosa made the first move away from the post-punk side of their sound and towards the symphonic side with Inferno. In the same year, the Italian band Rhapsody of Fire, then still known as Rhapsody, released their demo in the form of an EP titled Eternal Glory. Both of these groups will be very important to the style in the future. In the same year, Swedish death metal band Therion released Lapaka Cliffoth, which, according to Nightwish keyboardist and leader Tuomas Holopainen, is the first symphonic metal album in history. Finally, the Dutch band Irion will release the first in a series of rock operas with a strong symphonic character, the futuristic The Final Experiment. We should also emphasize that in that year, the amazing Imaginations from the Other Side by the German band Blind Guardian was released, which, although clearly power metal, had a strong symphonic tone in its background, and its huge success certainly influenced a lot of people. In 1996, we had even more releases. Expanding on what they had done previously, Angra will release Holy Land, and Royal Hunt will release Moving Target. The German band Imperium will also be joining the game, starting a very interesting career that will bring them close to various genres with their clearly symphonic A Winter Sunset. However, the truly groundbreaking releases will be two and will feature real orchestras. German power metalers, Rage will release Lingua Mortis with the Prague Symphony Orchestra, while the experimental alternative metal band Waltari from Finland will release an album titled Yeah, Yeah, Die, Die, Death Metal Symphony in Deep Sea with the Avanti Symphony Orchestra from Helsinki. This strange title, in one way, fully describes how the album sounds. Finally, Therion will continue what they started in 1995 and release what I believe, regardless of what Tuomas says, is indeed the first symphonic metal album in history. The Amazing Tale. A special note should be made about an album and a single that were released for the 1996 Christmas season. They were a song included on the Savatage concept album, Dead Winter Dead, Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224, and a Christmas album, Christmas Eve and Other Stories. Both were released under the name of a project created by Paul O'Neill, the producer of Savatage, which included the same musicians as the Florida band, and which obviously had very strong symphonic elements. The project name was Trans-Siberian Orchestra and became much more successful than Savatage. Today, they are one of the most successful Christmas music acts in America, with their tours selling out long in advance each year. Also that year, 4 Finnish cellists named Apocalyptica decided to release an album aptly titled Plays Metallica by 4 Cellos, where they played Metallica songs only on cellos, immediately making a strong impression due to the completely innovative philosophy of the project, but also managing to build a very successful global career, which continues to this day, with this album as a starting point. And so, we arrive at 1997. For many, year zero regarding symphonic metal. The 2 albums that are widely considered to have truly started the genre were released in 2 European cities, 2,500 kilometers apart, Amsterdam and Helsinki. In the capital of the Netherlands, a band called Within Temptation released their debut album, Enter, and in Finland, another band, Nightwish, released their first album titled Angels Fall First. Both bands had 2 very charismatic singers at their core, who immediately grabbed the attention with their excellent stage presence and stunning voices. For the Dutch, it's Sharon Den Adel, and for the Finns, it's Tarja Turunen. Alongside them, the aforementioned Italians, Rhapsody, released Legendary Tales, which will do nothing but confirm the expectations they had created with their demo 2 years prior. Let's mention something common that all 3 of these albums had. They were not called symphonic metal because the term didn't exist back then. Within Temptation and Nightwish were labeled gothic metal. while Rhapsody were named power metal, with the latter being particularly compared to Manowar due to their thematic content. All of that, however, mattered little. While all the releases of the last 2 years were made in a random way and in many different parts of the world, their unexpected success brought the symphonic sound to the forefront, resulting in albums and bands starting to pop up like mushrooms right up to the turn of the next century. So, for the 4 year period of 1997 to 2000, we had initially important releases from the usual suspects we've already examined.
heart. For my God, it will depart.
Wer einsam, gemeinsam.
The fact that the genre was unexpectedly successful is also evident from how Therion's album Woven performed commercially. At the time, the band had practically become the personal project of guitarist Christopher Johnson. The album was a particularly orchestral work, a sample of pure symphonic metal without any other influences. The excellent vocal performances of Martina Asner and Sarah Jezebel Diva helped the album sell almost out of nowhere 150,000 copies in Europe, demonstrating that this new style had come to stay. But as you can understand, many new names also emerged, such as the following, who released their first albums within this 4 year period.
Cry with a smile. My heart is bleeding.
Finally, we should emphasize that during the period we are referring to, there was a significant flourishing of three genres that could be considered related to symphonic metal, either because they used female singers or because they contained strong symphonic elements, or both. I'm talking about gothic metal, power metal, and symphonic black metal. Although the lines between genres were still drawn, there were also definite overlaps, and the future success of the style will bring future sound changes for many artists. At that time, we had some names that were very close to the sound we are examining, even though they technically belong to other styles. Characteristic examples are the aforementioned Blind Guardian, with their even more symphonic Nightfall in Middle-earth from 1998, as well as Balsagoth from the United Kingdom, who, having started as symphonic black metal, had begun to transition into the regular subgenre. Additionally, there were the Norwegian band Tristania, who, although quite gothic metal, had many symphonic metal elements in their sound, as did the Australian band Virgin Black, the Norwegian band Trail of Tears, and the Finnish band To Die For. From the power metal side, the American band Virgin Steel, the Finnish band Stradivarius, and especially, of course, the American band Camelot, had gradually started to become quite symphonic. In fact, as a form of indirect vindication of the choices made by the bands we mentioned earlier, even Metallica themselves will release a live album in 1999 called S&M, where we can hear them perform the metal anthems of a generation and an era, accompanied by a live orchestra. The beginning of the 2000s brought significant changes to the symphonic metal scene. Initially, the terms began to be gradually separated. We could no longer call the bands either gothic metal or power metal. They had strayed too far from their respective sounds and had become something autonomous. Of course, the change was gradual and it will be complete by the middle of the decade. Secondly, we had an initially simple move that would prove to be crucial. In 2002, guitarist and purveyor of the growling vocals Mark Jansen Left After Forever, and founded Epica. This band will have another very important voice and presence on vocals, Simone Simons. They will soon rise very high in the firmament of the style, to the point of becoming the third pole of symphonic metal after Nightwish and Within Temptation. Thirdly, global recognition will come. Until then, the genre was successful primarily in the countries where each band originated from, and, more generally, in Central Europe. But in 2004, two albums would come out that would launch it to global fame. Initially, Nightwish, who had been steadily rising since their 1997 debut, will release Once, which, featuring what is perhaps the genre's biggest hit, Nemo, will sweep the globe and take them on a world tour that will bring them literally everywhere: United States, Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, plus 5 concerts in Brazil. That same year, Within Temptation released The Silent Force, with which they made a significant stylistic shift, abandoning gothic and epic atmospheres for a more direct and modern sound based on catchy choruses. The album will make them superstars, selling 650,000 copies in Europe alone. Also, this newfound passion for more symphonic sounds found its way to many other outlets. The former Gothic rockers Lacrimosa will release the most symphonic album in their history, with 2003's Echoes. The legend of the visual K movement and leader of the Japanese Gothic band Malice Miser, Mana, will start his next project, Moi Dix Moi, and essentially play symphonic metal. Belgian symphonic black metalers, Ancient Rites will remove the black from their sound with their 2006 album Rubicon, and Swedish melodic death metalers Eternal Tears of Sorrow will also move toward more gothic and symphonic paths. Blind Guardian will give us what is perhaps the most symphonic metal moment of their entire career with their 2002 album A Night at the Opera, which was considered excellent by some and excessive by others. In 1999, the leader of the also German power metalers, Edguy, Tobias Sammet, founded a supergroup called Avantasia and released its first album, aptly titled The Metal Opera, in 2001. This band has released a total of 10 albums, on which Sammet is accompanied by a series of guest musicians and singers ranging from Klaus Meine, Jeff Tate, and Michael Kiske to Eric Singer of Kiss or Henjo Richter of Gamma Ray. The symphonic side of this band is, as you can imagine, very important. Finally, even the Eternal Warriors of true metal Man-O-War incorporated strong symphonic elements in their 2002 album Warriors of the World and their 2007 album Gods of War. Obviously, with this being the era of the genre's absolute peak, many new names will appear on the horizon. I'll mention the most characteristic ones for the first half of the period we are examining. The huge success of symphonic metal in the first half of the decade we're referring to brought about significant developments in the second half as well. The biggest news was, of course, Tarja Turuninen's departure from Nightwish, which caused shockwaves throughout the wider scene. The Finnish singer continued with a fairly successful solo career, while the band, after a period with the Swedish Anette Olzon, ended up with a solution that was almost equal in quality to Tarja. The singer of the disbanded After Forever, Floor Jansen. Their popularity, we could say, wasn't particularly affected by these developments. Quite the opposite, in fact. Also during this period, one band stood out from the dozens that were popping up like mushrooms, and that was the Dutch band Epica. While they may not have reached the sales peaks of the other two greats, they were extremely popular. Also, just like before, the genre's success continued to influence other areas, even sometimes unexpected ones. So, we also saw the entry of death metal into the whole affair, with the appearance of strong symphonic elements in that style too, like for example from the former brutal death metal band, the Monolith Death Cult, in their excellent 2008 album Triumvirate, and from my compatriots Septic Flesh in their awesome Communion from the same year. Now, since the two massive albums we mentioned earlier were released in 2004, and the popularity of the two bands that created them skyrocketed immediately afterward, the new names that emerged in the genre from 2006 onward were truly endless. It seemed like every European girl with a good voice and a friend or acquaintance who played metal guitar was forming a band hoping to become the new Tarja Turunen or the new Simone Simons. Read the names and judge for yourselves. As you saw, all the previous bands had female singers. Now, the power metal side of the scene didn't fall behind, despite Blind Guardian's relative retreat after the backlash caused by A Night in the Opera. And in this area, we saw a lot of activity in the second half of the 2000s, with the following bands:
Innocence is a phase of crawling name of a rose.
In 2011, the symphonic sound in metal was very different from 1995. Bands from all metal subgenres had no problem incorporating symphonic elements into their sound with the advancement of studio recording technology. Also, the success of the style made it possible for real orchestras to accompany the bands in the studio or live. Therion are consistently touring with an orchestra, while Rage, after using an orchestra on their album Lingua Mortis, as well as other ones, created a separate entity called the Lingua Mortis Orchestra, or LMO, which has been performing live with them on various occasions since 2006. In 2013, an album titled LMO was also released, recorded as Lingua Mortis Orchestra featuring Rage. Blind Guardian did something similar when they released the fully orchestral album Legacy of the Darklands in 2019. The only instruments you hear in the record are those of the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, with the band's singer Hansi Kirsch being the only band member to participate in the album, while the composition and concept of the work were handled by himself and the band's guitarist Andre Olbrich. For this reason, the album is credited to the Blind Guardian Twilight Orchestra, and not to Blind Guardian. Finally, my fellow countrymen, Septic Flesh, performed their work not just with a live orchestra, but also in one of the world's most famous theaters, the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, right under the Parthenon. Imagine how influential the style is that a band like the Finnish and Cypherum, who were initially a purely folk metal group, also incorporated symphonic elements into their sound, mainly in their 2015 album One Man Army. While in the strangest development of recent years, we saw one of the biggest bands in the deathcore scene, Lorna Shore, adding many symphonic elements to their sound in their 2024 album, I Feel the Everblack Festering Within Me. Staying within the extreme metal genre, the Italian band Flesh God Apocalypse became one of the most important names of the style, even though they started and remain primarily a death metal band. Another thing the genre helped change significantly is the position of women in metal. As we saw in the previous chapter, many bands followed the recipe of the top three by using female singers. In the years we live in, this tactic is applied by countless names across all metal subgenres and around the world. Artists like Tarja Turunen and Sharon Denadel have been instrumental in changing the audience's mindset and the way the metal community treats women. These singers are not there just to provide a beautiful face, but as fully equal members of the bands, sometimes even more important than their male bandmates. Otherwise, if we talk about the genre itself, after the creation of so many bands in the second part of the Golden Age, it was logical that there would be a saturation, which resulted in far fewer authentic symphonic metal names emerging during this period. I will mention the Brazilian band Hydria, the American band Seven Spires, the Swiss band Ad Infinitum, and the relatively biggest name of recent years, the German band Beyond the Black. Another scene that was clearly influenced by the orchestral sound is the one in Japan. Certainly, Mana's band played a role in this, as he is a huge idol in the country. So besides Versailles, bands like Lightbringer, Unlucky Morpheus, Yosei Teikoku, Zemeth, Fate Gear, Live Moon, Kamijo, and various others also experimented with the style. Now, unlike the classic symphonic sound, that of symphonic power metal has seen a steady rise in recent years. Many of the names that found success have already been mentioned in the video about power metal, but I will list some of the most characteristic ones.
Open my heart, I set sail for I knew. And we will die for the glory of our God. Never die when the rain is never cry. The days go by, we lose track.
In recent years, we've also seen the emergence of a style that could be called a subgenre of a subgenre, and that is none other than symphonic melodic death metal, or symphonic melodeath for short. The main representatives of the genre are the Finnish bands Brimir and Whispered, as well as the Canadian band Eternum. Of course, at the top of the style is another Finnish band, Wintersun, who have made quite a name for themselves, not only because of their excellent music, but also because they have lent their bassist and drummer to Nightwish, as well as their guitarist Timo Mentasari to Megadeth. I'll conclude with news from the genre's big three. You could say that things didn't exactly go perfectly for Nightwish. In 2019, their drummer of 22 years, Jukka Nevalainen, left, and in 2021, their bassist of 21 years, Marko Hietala, also left, both, as we saw, being replaced by members of Wintersun. The album they released in 2020, Human Nature, wasn't very well received by both the public and critics. Anyway, they returned in 2024 with the somewhat better Yesterwind, and they always remain an excellent live experience. Within Temptation saw Sharon Denadel release a solo electro-pop album in 2017, turned toward clear alternative metal paths in their last two albums, and in 2024 also lost their keyboardist of 24 years, Martijn Spierenberg. After these developments, I would say that the undisputed leaders of the genre at the moment are Epica, who have remained consistent in their style and continue to release excellent albums. Indeed, in 2024, the Symphonic Synergy, a spectacular live concert accompanied by a full orchestra and choir, took place in Amsterdam and was also released on the market as a Blu-ray DVD.